What happened before God said, "Let there be light"? A book banned from the Bible reveals what happened before creation, before Genesis, and how nothing in this world is what it seems. It exposes that this world is actually a prison, and that God is the warden, trapping souls on earth. It uncovers the real reason for the war in heaven, and that Jesus didn't come here to save us from sin, but to expose the greatest secret of all time. This secret is about your power, a power that's so great that it actually terrified the one that's pretending to be God. On the Origin of the World is an ancient Gnostic text, and it's so controversial that the church buried it for centuries. And no wonder. This text claims that the whole Genesis story is basically propaganda, fake news, a cover, up to keep you from discovering the truth about what you really are. What if the biggest conspiracy of all time was the Bible itself? This forbidden text is a coded guide to understanding how you can reclaim your divine nature right now. Sound crazy? Well, it gets crazier. I'm going to warn you, the story gets dark. And I mean really dark. We're talking about a God who traps humans, and then rigs the game so that you never figure out how to escape it. Basically, it makes you wonder if Saul was inspired by the Old Testament. But here's the good news. It's not all doom and gloom, because in this story is the key to liberation. A way to wake up from the nightmare and reclaim your divinity. On the Origin of the World is a text that was discovered in 1945, buried near the tombs of Egypt, and it dates back to somewhere around the 3rd century CE. It begins by telling the reader that most people believe nothing existed before chaos and darkness. The text says everybody, gods of the world, and mankind says that nothing existed prior to chaos. I shall demonstrate that they are all mistaken. Welcome to the secret history before Genesis. My name is Morg. I'm an ex-Christian revealing hidden knowledge the church doesn't want you to know. On the Origin of the World reveals a hidden reality before creation, where all that existed was an eternal realm of pure light. There was no conflict, no darkness, no suffering, just pure divine harmony. Guess what didn't exist yet? The God of the Bible, he wasn't even around. In this account, the real eternal force, the true God, wasn't a person, wasn't some figure in the clouds, but pure light itself, the source with the Gnostics called the One. Now things start to take a turn here, because this perfect realm of light didn't just sit there. It began to emanate rays of its divine light. Get this? These rays were actually beings called Uns, and each of these Uns reflected different aspects of the source. These Uns were infinitely more powerful than any angel or any god. In fact, no angel or biblical god even existed yet. The Uns worked together in perfect harmony, but the thing is, there's always a shadow waiting to come out. And now, my friends, welcome to the beginning of this cosmic drama. So enter Sophia. Her name means wisdom, and Sophia was one of the Uns, and she was pretty badass. She was a powerhouse of creation. Unlike the other Uns, Sophia was different. She didn't want to play by the rules. And what I mean by that is that in this perfect realm, all the Uns created in pairs. They maintained perfect balance. And Sophia? Well, she wanted to create something on her own. This is where everything falls apart, because she acted in a way that was imbalanced, and so what she created wasn't harmonious like the others. This wasn't a shining light or beautiful idea. What she created was shadow, a malformed chaotic force. This was kind of like a divine glitch in the Matrix, a cosmic mistake that couldn't be undone. But this shadow wasn't just some harmless byproduct. It was a living, breathing force of chaos. It was an anomaly, a being of darkness that couldn't harmonize with the eternal realms of light. For the first time, reality wasn't unified. This shadow introduced conflict, division, imbalance, and a chain reaction that would ripple through everything. But here's the worst part. This shadow, it didn't just sit there, it wanted power. So from this shadow would come the self, proclaimed God of the material world, a being that was so arrogant, so envious, and so blinded by its own arrogance that it would dare to declare itself the one true God. This is where things really take a turn, because Sophia, the divine being of wisdom, she acts without permission, creates a shadow, and then from that shadow, a being known as Yaldabaoth is born. The Gnostics describe Yaldabaoth as having the body of a dragon, the head of a lion with eyes that flashed like lightning bolts. Yaldabaoth isn't totally aware of the realms of light, but he can sense that there's something out there greater than him, and so he gets jealous. He looks around at the void and sees nothing but himself, and so declares, "I am God, and there is no other." If this sounds familiar, it should, because that's what God says in the Bible all the time. It sounds to me like someone needs a therapy session. This is where the Gnostics would say that Yaldabaoth goes horribly wrong, declaring himself the one true God. That was a big mistake in the Gnostic view. This isn't an act of power, it's sin. Because, according to them, we're all divine. We'll get to that in a moment. But every one of us is a fragment of the eternal light. So for one being to say, "I'm the only God, worship me," is essentially the worst sin possible, because it denies the divinity of everything else. On the origin of the world says, "And when he said this, he sinned against all the immortal beings." In other words, congratulations, you're the first one to commit blasphemy. So what does Yaldabaoth do with his newfound delusion of grandeur? Well, he decides to create. And he takes the formless chaos around him, matter without spirit, and shapes it into heaven and earth. This isn't some grand benevolent act of creation, like how it's described in the Bible. This is a being trying to make a throne for itself. Yaldabaoth doesn't stop at creating heaven. He decides to make some offspring, because every self-proclaimed God needs minions and henchmen, right? get this? He names them, it's kind of weird, by the sounds they make as they're born. When one of them goes Io, Yaldabaoth decides, "Great, your name is Io." And his second son says, "Eloi." And he gets named Eloi, and the third, he makes a sound like Astaphas. I didn't write this, so naturally, he's called Astaphas. I mean, you really can't make this up. There was another son whose name was Sabaoth, and he's extremely important. So we'll get back to him in a minute, but altogether, these beings of darkness form what are known as the Seven Archons, and they're not exactly the Justice League. Archon literally means ruler, and they're described as androgynous, embodying both masculine and feminine traits. This is a theme that you're going to see a lot in Gnosticism. The unification of opposites, but don't let that fool you into thinking that these are some balanced, enlightened beings. These are the architects, the rulers of chaos. So while these beings are inherently chaotic and destructive, they're also modeled after the divine pattern from the higher realms. It's kind of like someone took a perfect blueprint and made a distorted, glitchy version. They're powerful, sure, but they're not divine. On the origin of the world flips everything on its head. Heaven and earth aren't divine creations, but malformed prisons made by a delusional being, and the angels, not divine beings, but archons, rulers of chaos. Even Yaldabaoth, this supposed god, is revealed to be blind, arrogant, and totally unaware of the higher realms of light. It's no wonder the Church didn't want this narrative floating around. The Gnostics weren't just spinning wild tales for the sake of it. These stories are metaphors for the human condition and for the struggles that we face in understanding who we really are. As we peel back the layers of this story, you're going to see how it's actually transmitting a deep secret about your true self. What is that secret? We'll get to that, but first, what if the real war in heaven wasn't about Lucifer rebelling against God out of pride, but something else entirely? Let's talk about Sabaoth. Now he's interesting. This is Yaldabaoth's son, so Yaldabaoth, the god of the Bible, just got done creating the heavens and the earth, and the angels, or archons. And there's Sabaoth, just hanging out in Yaldabaoth's do-it, yourself chaos, filled universe. But he hears something that changes everything. Yaldabaoth is there in the middle of this creation, and he's getting a kick out of all the angels worshiping him. And so what does he do? Well, the usual. He tells him that he's the only God. The text says, "And he was honored by all the army of angels. He was delighted and continually boasted, saying to them, 'It is I who am God, and there is no other.'" But guess what happened? His mommy heard him, and she was pissed. The text says, when Sophia saw the impiety of the chief ruler, she was filled with anger. She was invisible. She said, "You are mistaken. Samuel, that is blind God." Being called Samuel is like being called by your full name when your mom's pissed. She was calling him blind and ignorant. But guess who heard her? Sabaoth. Sophia is basically like, "Hey kid, your dad's a fraud," and C'baoth actually gets it. He sees through all the lies and the chaos. And it's kind of like when someone finally realizes that they're in a pyramid scheme or some weird cult. C'baoth actually praises Sophia, and so in response, Sophia gives him some of the power of the realms of light. How cool is this story? He suddenly becomes illuminated. And the text says that because of this new power, he's now called the Lord of Armies. This is pretty much an act of cosmic mutiny, and this starts a great war in Yaldabaoth's heavens. You'll notice that sounds a lot like the revolt of Lucifer. But unlike the Christian version here, the Lucifer figure is the hero, and God is the villain. C'baoth isn't some prideful, power-hungry bad guy trying to overthrow God. He's more like the rebellious kid who finally realizes, hold on a second. My dad's actually an abusive control freak who lies to everyone. I don't need to stick around for this. Here's where things take an unexpectedly romantic turn. Sophia doesn't just give C'baoth divine light and call it a day. She also introduces him to her daughter,
So,
whose name literally means life, and let's just say C'baoth falls hard. Together, C'baoth and Zoe form a cosmic power couple, and she teaches him about the higher realms with his newfound power and knowledge. C'baoth creates a mansion that's 7 times better than any of the heavens Yaldabaoth could make. This is like the ultimate moving out of your parents' basement story, and Yaldabaoth is pissed and terrified. His own son, the one he thought he controlled, turned against him, aligned with Sophia and Zoe, and now has a realm that's more incredible than anything he could ever make. But Yaldabaoth is about to strike back. How? With death itself. Let me explain. And by the way, if you've made it this far, congrats, you're in deep now. And if you want to see how deep this rabbit hole goes, then like and subscribe, because there's a lot more to check out. And also check out my books in the description of this video before the Archons end it. Let's set the stage here. C'baoth, Yaldabaoth's rebellious son, has just pieced out, ditched his dad's chaotic matter-filled kingdom, and joined Team Sophia in the higher realms of light. He's shining with wisdom. He's got Zoe as his partner. And he's building a realm that puts Yaldabaoth's crappy creation to shame, and Yaldabaoth is not happy. This guy cannot handle rejection, so what does he do? He creates death. Do you actually see how cool the metaphor of balance here? His son runs off with Zoe, who is life, so Yaldabaoth creates death. I mean, it's a dick move. He's basically trolling. But you got to admit the theme of balance of life and death is really beautiful. But wait, it gets better here, because death, according to the Gnostic text, is an androgynous being. Because of course it is. This is Gnosticism, where duality is everywhere, and this androgynous death doesn't just stop at existing, it gets busy. It mixes with its own nature, if you know what I mean, and spawns 7 offspring who are also androgynous, so each of these 7 have both a male and female name. These aren't just any kids, though. Meet the worst family ever. The male offspring of death are envy, wrath, weeping, sighing, mourning, lamenting, and groaning. And the female offspring of death are lust, grief, bitterness, cursing, sighing again, because apparently death needs extra sighing. I don't know, quarrelsomeness. And these are all the archonic forces. These are the spiritual shackles that keep humanity enslaved. But, and this is the beautiful part, Gnosticism also teaches that death isn't the end. It's just another layer of the illusion. Yaldabaoth wasn't just insecure, he was terrified. And somewhere deep down, even this false god had a suspicion that something greater than him did exist before him, and that haunted him. So what did he decide to do? He decided to test the universe. On the Origin of the World describes this, and Yaldabaoth says, "If anything has existed before me, let it appear so that we may see its light." What happens immediately? A blinding light shines forth from what's called the eighth heaven, piercing through all the layers of reality, cutting through the heavens. And a human form appears within it, a being that's so incredible that Yaldabaoth was shook. This wasn't just any human. This was Adam, Eye of Light. Let's get one thing straight. When I say Adam, I'm not talking about some guy made out of dirt wandering around with a fig leaf. The original Adam wasn't made of flesh, but of pure light. Think of him as the perfect human prototype, not a mortal creature, but a luminous, immortal God. What this means is he was the reflection, the blueprint of what humanity was supposed to be before it got trapped in the material world. What did this divine human do? While Yaldabaoth was busy creating the material world like a bad Minecraft server, Adam, Eye of Light, created an entire vast eternal realm. And just to make sure there was no confusion about who had the better design skills, Adam added 6 more eternal realms inside that one. And it says that each one was 7 times better than anything Yaldabaoth had ever made out of his chaos realm. That's right, 7 times better, and Yaldabaoth was pretty mad at this point. Yaldabaoth's whole "I am God, and no one exists before me" is starting to sound like a pretty bad comedy routine. Even his own minions start roasting him, the rulers of chaos. His own guys, the Archons, look at Adam, Eye of Light, and then turn to Yaldabaoth, and they laugh. The text says, "The authorities saw him and laughed at the prime parent, because he had lied when he said, 'It is I who am God, and no one existed before me.'" They even go so far to say, "Is this not the God who ruined our work?" Notice how even the Archons here are acknowledging that this human of light is a god. Yaldabaoth tried to save what little dignity he had left, so he came up with a plan. If he couldn't get rid of Adam, he was going to try and do the next best thing he could think of: contain him. This is what Yaldabaoth said to the Archons. He answered and said, "Yes, if you do not want him to be able to ruin our work, come let us create a man out of earth. No longer will he ruin our work. Rather we shall make those who are born out of the light our servants for all the duration of this eternal realm." Basically, he was saying, "Oh crap, this guy is more powerful. Let's try and trap him before he ruins everything." And so the Archons tried to make their own version of Adam. what happens when a fake god tries to copy the real thing? Well, they didn't have any idea what they were doing. They're beings of death and destruction, not life. So they completely misunderstand the assignment, because the human that they try to make is a hollow copy. It's a lifeless, soulless meat suit that just sits there useless, like an unplugged robot. And when the Archons saw that their creation was lifeless, they left it, abandoned it like a broken toy. For 40 days it just sat there soulless, unmoving, because they had no idea how to give it real life, but Sophia did. Sophia had a plan. Before the Archons even made the physical body of Adam, Sophia let a drop of her light fall, and it became a human of light, and guess what? This human's name was Eve, but get this. Her name is Eve of Life, and it's actually Sophia's daughter, Zoe, in the form of a human of light. I know, it's a little confusing, right? Let's get this straight real quick. There's Sophia, and she's the one who accidentally gave birth to the chaotic shadow realm. There's Zoe, who is Sophia's daughter and the partner of Yaldabaoth. And then there's Eve of Life, who is Zoe in the form of a human of light. Why is all this even important? What if Eve was never meant to obey, but to create? Remember, the physical body of Adam is just laying there lifeless, so Sophia sends her daughter, Eve of Life, to give life to Adam. And that's exactly what she does. According to On the Origin of the World, Eve wasn't made from Adam's rib. Eve was a goddess of life, and she's the one who gave life to Adam. The text says, Adam, having arisen, suddenly opened his eyes. When he saw Eve, he said, You shall be called mother of the living, for it is you who have given me life. But there was a consequence to this. The true human, the divine spark, was now trapped in matter, and just like that, Yaldabaoth's scheme was complete. By creating a physical body, he created a system to ensnare the light within physical forms, keeping us locked in bodies that suffer age and forget our true origin. And he did it so that we would serve him, instead of awakening to our real power. Hold on. You might be wondering why the hell Sophia would send Eve to give life to Adam then. I mean, that seems weird, right? Why would she be trapping souls? Doesn't it seem like that's what she's doing? Not necessarily. She had a plan. Sophia believed that by infusing light into the darkness of matter, it would ultimately undo all the evil of creation, that it would destroy it from the inside out. Earlier, Sophia says to Yaldabaoth, There is an immortal man of light who has been in existence before you, and who will appear among your modeled forms. He will trample you to scorn, just as potter's clay is pounded. Yaldabaoth thought he was making a servant, but what he actually did was create a walking time bomb. A time bomb of divine knowledge. Divine light itself was now imprisoned in a cage of flesh. And if that light ever woke up and realized what it was, game over. From this moment on, the battle lines were drawn. Yaldabaoth and his Archons wanted to keep humanity ignorant, blind to what they really were. But Adam, Eye of Light, was the blueprint. The reminder of what we actually are. Let's think about things from the Archon's perspective here. They tried to make Adam, but he just lay there lifeless, so they ditched him. But when they came back, they see that he's somehow come to life. And then there's Eve, this luminous being of light, and they have no idea who she is. So naturally, they freak out because they realize that Evie is similar to Sophia. So they come up with a really gross plan. Basically, what they decide to do is defile her, by forcing themselves on her, because they believe if she mixes with darkness, that she won't be able to return to the realms of light. Then they plan to lie to Adam, saying that Eve came from his rib. On the Origin of the World says, the Archon said, "What sort of thing is this luminous woman? For she resembles the likeness which appeared to us in the light. Let us bring a deep sleep over Adam, and let us instruct him in his sleep to the effect that she came from his rib in order that his wife may obey, and he may be lord over her." But Eve, being the ultimate badass she is, literally laughs at their plan. What does she do? She blinds the Archons and leaves a lower version of herself with Adam, and then enters the Tree of Knowledge. So when the blind Archons come after her, she reveals herself as the Tree of Knowledge itself, and they completely lose it and run like cowards. The Archons have a problem, a big problem. Despite their attempts to play God, they're starting to realize that humanity, their creation, isn't as submissive as they hoped. There's a spark inside Adam and Eve, something that wasn't part of the original make humans dumb and obedient plan. So what's a bunch of cosmic insecure tyrants going to do? They terrify them into submission. The rulers gather together, and they go up to Adam and Eve. Remember, this Eve is now a lower physical version of Eve, not the higher Eve of life. But when they go up to Adam and Eve, they don't act like vengeful gods of wrath. The text actually says they come in acting timid, like nervous salesmen on the first day, trying to con you into a pyramid scheme. On the Origin of the World says, they came up to Adam and Eve timidly. They said to him, "The fruit of all the trees created for you in paradise shall be eaten. But as far as the tree of knowledge, control yourselves and don't eat from it. If you eat, you will die." Of course, this is a total scam. They just don't want you to realize your own divinity. So the Archons need Adam and Eve to stay ignorant, or it's game over for them. And how do you keep people from questioning their reality? Fear. Sound familiar? Kind of like what's going on today. Remember the serpent in the Garden of Eden. What if the serpent wasn't the villain, but the hero? The higher Eve, Eve of life, is about to ruin the Archon's plans. The higher Eve is not the physical version of Eve that she left with Adam. The text says that she appears as the beast, which is almost certainly referring to the serpent. But it also says that her real title is the instructor, and the Archons just call her the beast because, well, they're sore. Eve of life, as the serpent goes over to the lower version of herself, the physical Eve and Adam, and says, "What did God say to you? Was it, 'Do not eat from the tree of knowledge'?" The physical Eve replies, "Not only did he say, 'Do not eat from it,' but do not even touch it, or else we will die." This is what she tells them. The instructor said to her, "Do not be afraid. In death you shall not die." For he knows that when you eat from it, your intellect will become sober, and you will come to be like gods. Indeed, it was in jealousy that he said this to you, so that you would not eat from it. Eve, the human Eve, the physical Eve, hears this, and it clicks. She looks at the tree again, but this time differently, and so she takes the fruit, and she eats it. And she gives some to Adam, and he eats it too. And in that moment, their eyes were opened, and this is about seeing the world for what it really is. The illusion shatters. Eating from the tree wasn't the first sin, it was the first act of liberation. When the Bible says they realized that they were naked and ashamed. On the origin of the world reveals that this nakedness wasn't in an "oops, we forgot our pants" kind of way. It was a metaphor for them realizing that they had been naked in knowledge. They recognized that the archons, the rulers, the gods that made them, that they're not gods at all. And what did they think of the so-called God and his archons now? Well, the text made it crystal clear. It says they loathed them. They were very aware. Did you know that the movie The Matrix was inspired by all this? The humans in The Matrix are the trapped souls, the agents are the archons, and the fruit of the tree of knowledge. That's the red pill. Tell me in the comments if you want a video about all that. Adam and Eve, they just took the red pill and figured out what was going on. And you know the archons weren't going to take this well. The second they realize what's happened, they totally lose it. Earthquakes, threats, the whole fire and brimstone act. Adam and Eve, now aware, panic and hide, not because they're guilty, but because they know what's coming, that the archons are pissed, and sure enough, the archons show up demanding answers. Like some divine police force that just got outsmarted by the people they were trying to control. Yaldabaoth and the archons want answers, and Adam is still pretty scared, and he points to Eve, who in turn points to the instructor, or the serpent, and it's total chaos. But the authorities couldn't do much to the instructor, so they curse Eve, her offspring, Adam, the earth, the crops, pretty much everything they can think of. Their curses are petty and desperate. They know that they've lost the upper hand here, and the archons get even more paranoid. They see Adam and Eve as threats because they've gained knowledge. And what terrifies them the most? The possibility that Adam and Eve might eat from the tree of life and become immortal, fully divine beings. What do? They kick Adam and Eve out of paradise and place fiery angels with flaming swords to guard the tree. But again, it's all part of the plan. Even in exile, Adam and Eve carry the light within them. The rulers can curse and control the physical world all they want, but they can't extinguish the divine spark. But now let's talk about how Zoe gets her revenge. There's Sophia, her daughter Zoe, then Eve of Life, who's basically Zoe in the form of a divine human, and then the physical material version of Eve. Zoe is pretty pissed because the archons are basically with the lower version of herself in Adam. She sees what the rulers of darkness have done, cursing humanity, trapping them in ignorance, and basically making the earth their personal playground of suffering. And she's not having any of it, so with her full divine might, she casts the rulers down into the world of matter. She traps them in the very realm that they were trying to dominate, so they're no longer rulers in their lofty heavens. They're now reduced to demons soaking around the earth and manipulating humanity from the shadows. It's pretty fitting. It's a poetic justice. The jailers become prisoners themselves. But Sophia and Zoe don't stop there. They orchestrate a plan that's been in motion since the beginning of time, a plan to overthrow these rulers of chaos and liberate humanity once and for all, because here comes Jesus the Savior. But this is not the Jesus that you would recognize from Sunday school. This is the Gnostic Jesus, a revolutionary, a disruptor, and the ultimate opponent of the God of the Bible. In the Gnostic view, Jesus wasn't sent by the God of the Old Testament. In fact, he was sent to oppose that God, the God who drowns the world, demands sacrifices, and rules through fear. That's Yaldabaoth, and Jesus' message is a challenge to everything Yaldabaoth stands for. He comes here not to want worship or obedience, but to wake humanity up to its true divine nature. While Yaldabaoth says, "I am a jealous God, and there is no other," Jesus says, "You can become like me." Jesus' mission is to tear down Yaldabaoth's kingdom of lies and free the divine spark in everyone by bringing knowledge. The text says, "Now the Word that is superior to all beings was sent for this purpose alone, that he might proclaim the unknown. He said, there is nothing hidden that is not apparent, and what has not been recognized will be recognized. And these were sent to make known what is hidden, and the 7 authorities of chaos, and their impiety, and thus they were condemned to death." Things are about to get real, because guess what? On the origin of the world ends with the end of the world. So how does it all end? What's the finale to all this cosmic drama? First, in order to understand what it really means, there's something you need to know. You might be wondering, did all of this actually happen? Am I sitting here saying that there was actually a lion-faced God throwing a tantrum like an CEO of heaven? That Adam of light built himself a 7 times better universe like some cosmic celebrity, or that Eve was walking around as both a woman and a talking serpent at the same time? Not exactly. Before you breathe a sigh of relief here, let me hit you with something that's actually a lot more shocking. This is all happening inside you. Ancient people weren't dumb. They weren't sitting around making up stories about lion gods and forbidden fruit just for fun. They were trying to explain something huge, something that people still haven't figured out today. These stories, they're not about history, they're about you, they're about what's happening inside of you right now, every single day. Gnostic ISM was never just about gods and cosmic drama. It was about the mind, about the struggle between ignorance and awareness, about waking up to who you really are. Let's break it down. Yaldabaoth, the blind, arrogant ruler who says that he's the true God, that's your ego, the voice in your head that says, "I'm in control. I know everything I need to know. I'm the center of the universe. That ego is blind. It thinks that it's the source of everything, that nothing existed before it. But deep down, it's actually terrified that something greater exists outside of it, that it's not able to control, that it's not the highest power. And what does the ego do when it's scared? It lies, it creates illusions. It builds entire systems to keep you distracted, so you don't realize the truth about yourself. Then there's Adam, Eye of Light. This is the blueprint of what you could become. In other words, it's your higher self. This isn't about some floating, glowing guy in the eighth heaven. It's the part of you that knows better, the part of you that sees through the illusions, the part that knows that you're more than your thoughts, your fears, your insecurities. It's what you can become, but here's the problem. Your ego, Yaldabaoth, doesn't want you to realize this higher self exists, because if you do, game over. You stop living in fear. You stop believing the lies. You wake up. And what does the ego do? It creates a fake version of you, a shell, a programmed identity, a personality shaped by external forces. That's the earthly Adam. The version of you stuck in the system, believing whatever the world tells you to believe. The one who forgets who they really are. Here's where it gets really interesting, because it has to do with the most misunderstood character in this whole story, Eve. Because Eve isn't just a person here, she's a process. Eve is intuition, inner wisdom, that little voice in your head that says, hey, something's not right here. She's the moment that you start questioning everything, and when the archons, your fears, doubts, and programmed beliefs say, don't eat from that tree, don't ask questions, don't seek knowledge, just obey. And what does Eve do? She calls BS. Adam and Eve end up eating from the tree of knowledge, and they wake up, the illusion shatters, and suddenly you see the world and yourself as it really is. Let's talk about the biggest scam in history, the fall of man. Because if you really think about it, Adam and Eve didn't fall, they rose. They gained knowledge. They saw through the lies. They realized their own power. And how does the system react when someone breaks free? Panic, earthquakes, curses, divine threats. The Archon freak out and do what every controlling power structure does when it loses control. This sounds a lot like what happens today when people break out of any system of control, doesn't it? With all this in mind, what does the end of the world in our story mean? On the Origin of the World says the Archon's days are numbered. When humanity starts to wake up, the text describes their downfall, their heavens collapsing, force is consumed by fire, and the entire realm of darkness obliterated. It says, their heavens will fall one upon the next, and their forces will be consumed by fire. Their eternal realms too will be overturned, and his heaven will fall and break into two. Then it describes how the light within us will triumph and return to its source, and the glory of the light will fill everything. Humanity, finally free from the ruler's influence, will enter the kingless realm. But what does the kingless realm mean? This whole story isn't about something that literally happened in the past or an actual physical event in the future. It's about something that's happening all the time inside of you. The ego, Yaldabaoth, wants to keep you asleep, trapped in illusion. It wants you to stay busy, distracted, afraid, not questioning anything. The higher self, atom of light, is the part of you that knows something out there is greater. It's waiting for you to recognize it. It's your higher self. And Eve, the instructor, is that spark, that voice that urges you to ask and seek and awaken. What's the kingless realm? It's a state of consciousness where we've mastered ourselves. It's a place with no rulers because we rule ourselves. It's the kingless realm. Here's the most important part to remember about all this. Every time you choose fear over questioning, you obey the archons, you let them rule you. Every time you choose comfort over truth, you stay trapped in their system. But every time you choose to ask, to seek, to wake up, you eat the fruit. And that's the real secret. The Garden of Eden isn't a place in the past. It's in your mind. And you're still standing before that tree every single day with a choice: eat or obey. There's a lot more to the story. And if you want to know the real reason that God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, watch my video on it now.